Hello history buffs and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hannah and if you're new here, welcome to the channel. And today we are going to continue our exploration into the Tudor princesses. The people on this list are the female descendants of King Henry VII and Queen Elizabeth of York, the first Tudor monarchs, and are therefore females who have a claim to the English throne and have English royal blood, even if they are not necessarily titled or technically are princesses. One caveat is that I won't be including illegitimate children. The other caveat that I have placed on this video is that everyone on this list was born before the death of the last Tudor monarch, Queen Elizabeth I, on the 24th of March, 1603. I do also have a male version of this of all of the Tudor princes, so make sure you go check that out as well, and part 1 will be in the description box down below. Let's look at the descendants of King Henry VII's eldest daughter, Margaret Tudor, Queen of Scotland. More specifically, those who descend from Mary, Queen of Scots. So Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary Stuart, or Queen Mary I of Scotland, was born on the 7th of December 1542. This queen, although the first Queen of Scotland to rule in her own right, is better known as Mary, Queen of Scots, and was born at Linlithgow Palace in Scotland, to parents King James V of Scotland and his wife and queen, Marie of Guise. Mary's father, James V, died when she was only 6 days old. Check out my video on Tudor Princes to find out more information on him. Ascending to the throne at a mere 6 days old, Mary became the youngest monarch in British history. The responsibility of regency fell upon her relative, James Stuart, Earl of Arran. Crowned at the Chapel Royal in Stirling Castle on the 9th of September 1543, Mary was a mere 9 months old and not yet able to walk. Adorned in a splendid satin-jewelled gown, she wore a red velvet mantle adorned with ermine for the momentous occasion. Upon King James's death, King Henry VIII decided that he wanted his son, Edward, and future King Edward VI to marry Scotland's Queen Mary. However, the Scots weren't exactly enthusiastic as the English, and what was known as the rough wooing ensued. What didn't help was that the Regent Earl of Arran signed a treaty with Henry in 1543, which proposed to unite the thrones of both countries in the young couple. Meanwhile, Mary's mother, Marie of Guise, supported by Cardinal Beaton, did not favour the alliance. For her safety, the young Queen of Scots was transported to the island of Inchmahome. Following the death of King Henry VIII, the Duke of Somerset, who was Lord Protector for Henry's young son, led an army north and triumphed over the Scots at the Battle of Pinkie Cleugh, or also known as Black Saturday, on the 10th of September 1547. Seeking protection, Marie of Guise forged an alliance with her homeland of France. At the age of 6, Mary was affianced to the young heir of France, Dauphin Francis. Her upbringing unfolded at the court of her future father-in-law, Henri II. A charming child, Mary formed a strong bond with her betrothed and his siblings in their shared nursery. The union of Mary and the Dauphin Francois took place on the 24th of April, 1558, at Notre Dame. Regular correspondence ensued between Mary and her mother, Marie of Guise, who remained in Scotland as regent for her daughter. Mary's hereditary claim to the English throne stemmed from her grandmother, Margaret Stuart, the eldest daughter of King Henry VII. Upon Elizabeth I's disputed legitimacy, Mary's father-in-law boldly quartered the arms of England with those of the Queen of Scots, asserting her as the rightful heiress to England. Although this deeply offended Elizabeth, Mary basked in the favour of the French court, as Henri II affectionately noted, "The little Queen of Scots is the most perfect child I have ever seen." Despite the promising present, these actions would later lead to disastrous consequences for Mary. Corresponding frequently with Marie of Guise, Henri II expressed his delight in his young daughter-in-law. Mary's maternal grandmother, Antoinette of Guise, described her as a very pretty, graceful, and self-assured. Following Henri II's death, Mary's husband, Francois, ascended to the throne, making her the Queen Consort of France. While Mary was away, the influence of Protestantism gained ground in Scotland, driven by the fervent preacher John Knox. The Catholic Mary of Guise fought a futile battle against the unstoppable tide of the Reformation. Upon Marie of Guise's death, the young Mary, who inherited her father's emotional disposition, found herself grappling with profound grief. Adding to her sorrow, a few months later, her fragile husband, Francois II, passed away from an ear infection, rendering the 18-year-old a widow. She found herself no longer welcome or influential at the French court, now under the shrewd control of her mother-in-law, Catherine de' Medici. Mary returned to her home of Scotland. Remember, although she was Queen Consort of France, she was Queen Regnant, or Queen in her own right, in Scotland. She arrived in Leith on the 19th of August 1561. Her illegitimate half-brother, James Stuart, became one of her biggest supporters upon her return, and Mary created him the Earl of Moray. The problem was that Mary was a Catholic, but while she was away, Scotland had become increasingly more Protestant thanks to John Knox. Mary would continue her Catholic Mass, but also showed tolerance to the Protestants to try and keep the peace. As Queen, Mary was expected to wed and produce an heir, a trend that her English cousin defied. But it seems that Mary was set on marrying her cousin, Henry Stuart Lord Darnley, and the two wed at Holyrood on the 29th of July 1568. Queen Elizabeth I openly disapproved of the match, as the union only strengthened their claim to her throne. But she need not to worry, as the marriage was an unhappy one. Darnley was known to drink like a fish, and Mary would come to be embarrassed by her husband. As such, she spent less time with her husband and more time with her favourite musician, David Rizzio. Rumours spread that Rizzio and the Queen were having an affair, and Darnley became convinced that the baby in Mary's stomach, because yes, she was pregnant by the way, was not his, and that it was Rizzio's. Darnley one evening burst into Mary's apartment with Lord Ruthven and other Scottish lords, and stabbed Rizzio to death in front of his heavily pregnant wife. Mary would never forgive her husband for the murder of her friend. The baby was born in June 1566 at Edinburgh Castle. He was named James Charles. Queen Elizabeth I of England stood as the baby's godmother by proxy at his baptism. On the 10th of February 1567, Lord Darnley was at a house at Kirkerfield, near Edinburgh, and the house was blown up by gunpowder.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off!
The main suspect in his murder was James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, Mary Queen of Scots' next husband.
You what?
However, James was declared innocent, and he and Mary married on the 15th of May 1567 at Holyrood Palace. This match was very unpopular, to the point that the Scottish lords revolted. Mary fought for her marriage and right as queen, but her forces were no match for the Scottish lords, and she surrendered. Bothwell fled to Norway. Mary was taken to Lochleven Castle and forced into abdicating in favour of her infant son James, and her brother, the Earl of Moray, was appointed regent. Mary fled Lochleven in 1568 and rode for England, hoping that her dear sister and cousin, Elizabeth, would help and protect her.
You serious?
When she arrived in England, Elizabeth refused to grant Mary an audience and instead placed the former Queen of Scots in confinement. The Queen of England had a dilemma. She could aid Mary's attempt to reclaim her throne, but that would not be politically or financially smart for England. But she can't allow Mary to go to France for help, as that could increase France as a threat to England. But if Mary stayed in England, then she becomes a rallying point for English Catholics. So she decided that Mary was to stay in England as a prisoner. Meanwhile, in Scotland, James, who was now king, would grow up in the Calvinist religion and would be influenced by his mother's enemies, who would groom him to regard his mother as an adulteress and a murderer. On the 4th of February 1569, Mary was relocated to Tutbury Castle in Staffordshire, where the harsh, cold draughts negatively impacted her health. She developed a strong aversion to the castle, expressing discontent about the winter winds whistling through her chamber. She described it as sitting squarely on top of a mountain in the middle of a plain, subjecting her to all the winds and injuries of heaven. Although she was initially moved from Tutbury in 1569, Mary returned in 1570, following the Norfolk plot's failure. Sir Ralph Sadler, Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, became her guardian and treated her with kindness, permitting her to engage in activities like hawking and riding. However, after Sadler, the strict Puritan Sir Amyas Paulet took over, leading to Mary's disdain. Paulet went so far as to humiliate her that he removed her royal cloth of state, reducing the Queen to tears. Mary was moved to Chartley Castle in 1585. After enduring many years of English captivity, Mary attempted to negotiate with James through a Guise emissary for an association or joint rule with him in Scotland. Her son, however, was more eager to gain the approval of Elizabeth to favour his own ends and concluded that the association desired by his mother should neither be granted or spoken of hereafter.
Boy, don't make me come up there and be a parent!
First time for everything!
Oh ho ho!
Mary, deeply wounded, wrote, "I am so grievously offended at my heart, at the impiety and ingratitude that my child had been constrained to commit against me." In a state of desperation, Mary collaborated with Elizabeth's maternal cousin, the Catholic Thomas Howard, Duke of Norfolk, a highly influential nobleman in England. Their conspiracy aimed to assassinate the Protestant Queen and install Mary as the ruler of England, with Norfolk as her consort.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Elizabeth's agents uncovered the plot, leading to Norfolk's execution. While Mary's life was spared, Elizabeth heightens the stringency of her confinement. In response to the conspiracy, Parliament introduced a bill in 1572 to bar Mary from the throne. Despite this, Elizabeth declined to give her approval to the bill. Elizabeth's chief spy master, Francis Walsingham, devised a plan to neutralise the threat posed by Mary and led to her execution. In 1586, Anthony Babington, a fervent Catholic, played a central role in a conspiracy aimed at liberating Mary. Coded messages were exchanged between Mary and the conspirators using beer barrels, but Walsingham's agents consistently intercepted these barrels, along with their incriminating responses. When Mary responded affirmatively to the plotters, as Walsingham had anticipated, her fate was sealed. Walsingham swiftly moved against the unsuspecting Queen. The traitors were apprehended and executed, while the Queen faced trial for her transgressions. The trial of Mary, Queen of Scots, unfolded at Fotheringhay Castle in Northamptonshire, overseen by a panel of 40 lords. Mary adeptly represented herself, cautioning her judges, "Remember, the theatre of the world is wider than the realm of England." Despite her skillful defence, the outcome was predetermined, and she was pronounced guilty. Elizabeth, hesitating due to concerns that her cousin's execution might give Philip of Spain a pretext for invading England, eventually yielded and reluctantly signed Mary's death warrant after much hesitation. On the eve of her execution, Mary Queen of Scots spent the night distributing her meagre possessions to the loyal servants who had stood by her during captivity. She also penned letters to her brother-in-law, the King of France, and Philip II of Spain, urging them to reward her faithful attendants. After these heartfelt tasks, she lay down on her bed without undressing. A message was sent to her estranged son, James, conveying her deepest desire, which had consistently been to witness the unification of the kingdoms of England and Scotland. On the 8th of February 1587, Mary met her end at Fotheringhay Castle. Demonstrating regal grace every step of the way, she approached the scaffold with determination and dignity. Clad in black satin and velvet, Mary adorned a deep red petticoat, symbolising the colour of martyrdom. On that day, the 8th of February 1587, Mary, former Queen of Scots, was beheaded. Elizabeth Stuart, Queen of Bohemia. Elizabeth Stuart was the eldest daughter and second child of King James I of England and VI of Scotland, and his wife and queen, Anne of Denmark. She was born on the 19th of August 1596, and she was named after her godmother, Queen Elizabeth I of England. When her father became King of England in 1603, Elizabeth, along with her parents and her elder brother, travelled down to England. Elizabeth wed Frederick V, the Elector of Palatine, on the 14th of February 1613 at the Palace of Whitehall. The marriage was a popular match, except with the bride's mother, as Anne, who was a daughter, sister and wife of a king, thought that Frederick was too lowly for her daughter, and was disappointed that her daughter would not be queen. Despite this, the ceremony was described as a wonder of ceremonial and magnificence even for that extravagant age. Her elder brother Henry, who was heir apparent, had died a few months before, and the celebration was much needed. Elizabeth and Frederick celebrated their nuptials in London for 2 months before leaving for the continent. Their marriage, by all accounts, was a happy one that would become a loving one. The pair had 13 children. 6 years into their marriage, Frederick received an offer to ascend to the throne of Bohemia. The predominantly Protestant nobility had risen against their Catholic Habsburg rulers. Despite his reservations, Frederick agreed to the offer, with Elizabeth providing unwavering support. In November 1619, she was crowned Queen of Bohemia, fulfilling her mother's aspiration to see her daughter become a queen. However, her reign would be a short one, only lasting a year as her husband Frederick was defeated at the Battle of White Mountain, one of the battles in the 30 Years' War. Frederick and Elizabeth were forced to flee, and they gained the nicknames of the Winter King and Queen. They fled to The Hague, where Elizabeth supported her husband in his attempt to reclaim his lands and title. Frederick unexpectedly died in November of 1632. His death deeply affected Elizabeth, as she was devastated at the loss of her husband. She now channeled her energy into fighting for her elder son's claim. Her younger brother Charles, who was now King of England, asked for her to return, but she refused, fearing that returning to England would damage her children's claim to the Palatinate. Her stubbornness and refusal to give up seems to have paid off, as her son, Charles Louis, would eventually regain his father's title and land. Elizabeth's brother Charles would be executed in 1649, and England was now not a safe place for the monarchy, as Oliver Cromwell was in charge as Lord Protector. When Cromwell died in 1658, he passed the title of Lord Protector to his son Richard. So he wasn't king, but he was basically king. Richard, however, lasted for less than a year, as the English subjects realised that they actually quite missed having a monarchy. So Elizabeth's nephew Charles was restored to his birthright as King Charles II of England, Scotland and Ireland in 1600. It was only after the restoration of the monarchy that Elizabeth would return to England in 1661. Elizabeth Stuart would die a year later on the 13th of February 1662. She was buried next to her elder brother, Prince Henry. Margaret Stuart was born on Christmas Eve 1598, and she was the second daughter of King James I and VI and his wife and queen, Anne of Denmark. Margaret was baptised in April 1599. However, she was supposed to have been baptised earlier, but the ceremony had been postponed as that winter had been particularly harsh and there were worries that the princess would catch a cold and die. James had written to his nobles inviting them to the baptism and a feast. Right, trusty friend, we greet you well, having appointed the baptism of our dearest daughter to be here at Holyrood House upon Sunday the 18th of April next. In such honourable manner as that action craved, we have therefore, though good right, effectually, to request and desire you to send us such offerings and presents against that day as is best then in season and convenient for that action.
Presents, please!
As you regard our honour and will merit our special thanks. So not doubting to find your greater willingness to pleasure us herein. Since you are to be invited to take part of you own good cheer, we commit you to God. James spent £400 on clothes crafted by tailor Peter Sanderson for Margaret and her sister Elizabeth to wear at the baptism. The festivities at Holyrood House featured feasting, dancing and tournament games like running at the ring and running at the glove. There's a lot of running going on there. Among the attendees were notable figures such as the Duke of Lennox, the Earl of Huntly, the Earl of Mar, and the Chancellor. The infant princess was committed with her elder sister Elizabeth to the custody of Lord and Lady Livingston under Helena Crichton, who was her mistress nurse. If we look back to James's account, we can see that Margaret became ill in around March 1600, as there are entries for a supply of certain drugs, medicaments, and other gear for the use of the Lady Margaret during the time of her sickness. We can assume that the young princess died in the same month, as the next entries in the accounts speak of spices for her embalming, flannel and crimson silk, and Florence ribbon for the decoration of her body, and a kist of lead to be conveyed from Edinburgh to Linlithgow. We can infer that she died at Linlithgow, as this was the residence of Lord and Lady Livingston, the people whose care she was in. There is no entry that references her burial, but it is plausible that she was privately interred in the Abbey of Holyrood. Thank you for listening to this part of my series. Join me next time as I will explore more princesses who descend from King Henry VII. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and make sure the notification bell is on so you never miss a video. And if you really enjoyed this video, then why not give a super thanks. But anyway guys, until the next one, have a wonderful day. Bye.